We're going to get started. I know some people probably join right at 1 or right at 11 at 10. Excuse me. I know what time it is. I know people will probably keep joining in, but if you want to get started doing a quick introduction, we're going to do a lot of our interacting over on Padlet today. I love Padlet. I learned so much more. It keeps adding new things. So we're going to use that for some interactivity. Plus, when we record these, I know quite a few people wanted to come and could not be here at 10 o'clock because I know middle of the day doesn't work for a lot of teachers, a lot of librarians, a lot of coaches. So we are recording this. And I know that folks will want to join in and do some of the activities, and you don't get to read the chat when you're watching the recording. So you can use the chat to talk to us, no problem. We'll send some links and stuff out there too. But we really want to interact over on Padlet so that you and our friends that watch the recording will get to have access to the same resources and all that good stuff. So if you'll head over there, do an introduction. I'm going to play some calm music for about 2 minutes or so while these introductions are being added over to Padlet. If you're just joining us, we're going to do some introductions over on the Padlet. So if you'll hop over there. Totally good. Emily says you're going to be interactive via Padlet and chat. That is no problem whatsoever. Just glad that you're here and can do some learning while there's testing going on around you. A good use of time and quiet time. You can give me about another minute and a half. I'll work on Padlet. Like some of you are still working on those introductions and the answers, so I'm going to give you about 30 more seconds. All right, if you didn't get a chance to finish, don't worry, you'll still have time. And as I'm doing this little bit of introduction, but if you have not hopped over to Padlet yet, there's some good stuff on there. So go hop over and see some of the people that are joining us. I know that we'd have quite a few media coordinators just because I recognize a lot of you. And then it looks like there is a good variety of a little bit of everything. So I'm excited to see that we've got some good variety. But hi, library friends, because I see a lot of you in here. So we are going to talk today about media literacy and about research and how AI is kind of influencing this part of our work. I will be very honest with you and tell you that I am no expert. If you came to this session thinking you were getting an expert leader, I wish. I am not. Instead, I look at this as kind of like I actually proposed this topic a couple months ago because I wanted to have what I call like my radar up. I wanted just to be thinking about these things and looking for examples and just spending some time thinking about it. And so that's where I'm at. I'm very much a learner when it comes to AI. I have a lot of intimidation when you're working with people like Vera and you're working with people like Stacy. Lindsay has helped me with so many things. So I'm always a learner when it comes to this stuff. And so I hope that gives you a little peace of mind if you also feel like you're a learner in this. And again, if you were coming for expert status, by all means, please log in when Stacy and Vera are leading. And just know that if you're here and plug along and you do feel like you're a leader in these, please chime in. That is exactly why I wanted to kind of approach this as an opportunity for everybody to get to share. And that's also why we're doing this on Padlet. So if you joined us a few minutes late, the reason why we're going to do a lot of interactivity over on Padlet is for that, so that people can engage whether we're here live or watching the recording, because the chat is just not as fun when you're watching the recording, but it is nice to be able to contribute over on Padlet. So and I just learned like 2 weeks ago about some new AI integrations. I knew about the I can't draw, and I see that some people use that in their introduction, which is super fun. I thought I really love Natalie's, of course. That Funko one is cute, and I love that. And I thought the joy that is in Lauren's was great. Both teachers or educators or adults or whatever they are in that picture look really happy. So it's kind of fun to see that as well. So I knew about that, but now like Padlet will just like create a Padlet for you using a prompt. So if you haven't explored that yet, give that a try. So some fun things, but we're going to focus in a little bit more about, again, like I said, media literacy and research. And we're going to start first with media literacy. So you'll notice on the top of the Padlet, there is a series. So I tried to number it so that you could follow along. And we're going to jump in now. If you're still introducing yourself, perfectly fine. You can keep doing that. And if you didn't answer that question about why you thought this was important, we'd love to have it, because Lindsay's actually going to do something in the background while we're doing this first activity together about why we're all here, why we picked this topic. So please feel free to add that as a comment if you haven't done that already. So let's jump over to column number 2, though, and we're going to do a quick little mini lesson from the News Literacy Project. And if you're not familiar with this already, I really love their website. I'm going to show you a couple of resources from them today, but it just has some really great content that already exists for you and it's just ready to plug in and go. So that's actually where we're going to start, is doing one of their daily do nows. This is like a 5 to 10 minute bell ringer kind of activity. So you can add a comment. So you could either comment under that first pinned post, or if you want to just use the chat in Teams, that's fine too. But I would love to know what your answer is to this first question. And I'm jumping ahead, but you have this link in the Padlet as well, so you can see. But their most recent one that they posted was this picture of Simone Biles. And the question is, what are some clues to tell you that this post is an advertisement? So we're going to do a little media literacy activity. What are some hints? All right, I see a hand up. Rebecca, tell me what the hint is that you see.
Well, actually, I was going to say, I can't see it super well because it's kind of small.
Oh, is it?
Yes, but it could just be me, but I'm not sure if anyone else is having that issue as well.
Okay, if you are having that issue, you're going to want to, Pam, is it small for you too?
No, I was going to say if you click on the link, you can see it, but I also was going to answer your question.
Tell me.
It says paid partnership.
Yeah, paid partnership is a big thing. And then somebody, I see Kay also mentioned like hashtag ad, right? So paid partnership, hashtag ad. So Simone Biles is very recognizable person, right? And if she posts things on Instagram, for example, now this is required, right? So if they're going to be using these, using these platforms for these paid partnerships, they do have to include that. That's required. One thing that I think is kind of interesting though is what about regular influencers? Your everyday people influencers. They may not use that hashtag ad or have that paid partnership with. Some of them do, but not all of them. Thank you, Pam, and thank you, Rebecca, for mentioning that too, that you couldn't see it. So on the top of the Padlet, in column 2, you can actually click on that and it'll open up the exact same slides that I'm showing you. So let me click ahead and show you, like it gives you on the next slide. It even points out those two things. So this is one of those, again, quick activities you can do with students. It gives you a editorial. So, being able to kind of think the same thing through. Now, most of us are in social media. And so we see some of these commentaries and things happening on social media. But, prior to social media, a lot of what people would see would be cartoons and things in printed press, right? So kind of being able to bounce those two things back and forth is a good way for students to be able to make some connections. And then they also have some other thoughtful questions. And I'm going to open this up in just a second and show you some really cool teaching strategies that you can use with this. But whoops, I jumped ahead a little bit. Jump ahead, sorry. But this is a great little blurb that came. So same week 9, right? So I was in the week 9, the same thing with Simone Biles. And it's asking this question about what steps can you take to fact check claims made by content creators. So that's that jump ahead like I was mentioning. So yes, we can see Simone Biles is held to that accountability step of having to explain that this is a paid partnership and it's an ad. But what about a lot of other people, right? So it says a well-known brand name and a professional interface are stripped away. Misinformation can be especially hard to spot when it comes to complicated economy or finance claims that are tougher to fact check. So, this is kind of back to that, how quick are we to believe what we see online? And if it's Simone Biles, it's one thing, but if it's somebody else that I just follow, how am I going to know that this other librarian, for example, I know many of you are librarians in here, didn't have a paid partnership or isn't being, paid to place something in their video? And I think those are some things for us to think about, but also for our students to kind of take that step too. Most of them are following content creators that are not Taylor Swift and Simone Biles, right? So many of that is kind of something to think about. So let me hop off this screen and show you, if you haven't opened up those Google Slides yet, let me show you how great this resource is. So these are those kind of quick couple minute, good media literacy lessons. But do you see on the bottom here, we actually get some speaker notes that tell us specifically what you can do with your students. And then they also have things linked out like there's actual lessons that you can use as well on their website called Checkology. And so all of these things, all these strategies and skills have something to go with it. It also gives you the source. So if you didn't want, if you wanted to print this out instead of projecting it, you could have this printed out and laid out on tables where students could, maybe do like a writing protocol around it. So all of these have some really good content, as well as the original original link, the original source. And then something like this, where it has this reflect piece about the content creators, it comes with an infographic that you would be able to also print and use as well, which is pretty helpful. So let me take a couple steps back. Is there anything else you want to see or discuss when it comes to this resource? I'll pause for just a second.
Hey, Molly, this is Megan. What grade level is this geared to? I may have missed that. I'm sorry.
That's a great question. A lot of this news literacy, I would say, is probably 4th grade and up, and then obviously you would want to make your judgment call. I'm clicking on the 4 educators, and then if you log in, you just have to have a free account for all of their resources. But what I've shared with you so far is you don't have to log in for. But if you can see here, they have grades 4 through 6, 7 through 9, and 10 through 12. So you could definitely take some of these and structure it down if you teach below 4th grade. But I would, use kind of a careful eye in terms of what you would share. But you'll see here that every one of these resources does have the age group listed. That's a great question.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. Anything else we want to chat about before we move on? All right, cool. Sounds good. So while you were working on introducing yourself and all of that good stuff, I think in the background, Lindsay, were you working on oh wait, I have one more thing to show before we get to the summary anyways. This was part of this. I'm gonna, hang on. Go back in presenter view. This was pretty cool. This was a resource from the same place, from the News Literacy Project. And I'm going to start it over so that you can hear her actually talk through this. But it's a TikTok. I'm going to be honest, I don't use TikTok. I know what will happen if I use TikTok. Put it on there as my disclaimer to say, I know I'll go deep into the black hole with Alice and the White Rabbit if I ended up on TikTok. So I just don't personally use it. But this was a really great resource. And it's one of those things that I found linked actually in that the Google slide deck that I just showed you. So she's walking through how she was actually scrolling herself and got a little hung up on something and was like, is that even real? And so I thought it was really cool that she saw that and went, oh, teachable moment. So I think this is a really great way that, again, we can kind of take that, here's a Google slide deck and we can look at real things, but now we can also just show and talk about how we practice using things like doing some of these back checking of media ourselves.
Harry Potter Dementor is this thing. I work for the News Literacy Project. We teach people how to not fall for viral manipulated content, so here's how I looked into it. Starting with a reverse image search, I took a screenshot of the video and brought it to images.google.com requesting desktop mode. Unfortunately, my results weren't all that helpful. Instead, it just suggested other TikTok videos, which isn't great since social media will recommend videos based on engagement and not how high quality the information is. But I was able to find this video from Astro Kirsten, who said that what we're seeing in this video is known as a scud cloud. My next step was to see if Astro Kirsten is a credible source, and this can be as simple as just going to the person's bio. Their verified account lists them as an astrophysicist, which gives me more confidence. But it's good practice to wait till multiple sources are confirming the same thing before posting impulsively. And eventually the Miami Herald and Yahoo News reported that this spooky formation over Sydney, Australia is believed by experts to be a scud cloud, but it's a good reminder that you should still take the time to fact check anything you see online that seems a little suspicious.
Okay, so just kind of cool that, here's somebody who worked for the News Literacy Project, and she was taking the exact same steps that we need to practice ourselves, but also that we're trying to teach our students. So thought that was kind of an interesting kind of pause and think about, is there a time that you have been spoofed by something that you saw recently on social media? And if so, how did you fact check it? Anyone want to be bold and tell us?
Molly, I have to tell you the story from last week. I don't even remember what I was looking at, but my daughter who's in 6th grade was sitting next to me and I was like, oh my gosh, is this real? And she looked at me and she said, not everything on the internet is real. And that doesn't look like it is real. So just to reiterate, so important that we keep hitting that hammer on the head with kids because they are listening even when we think that they are not.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for saying that, Lindsay. It's so true.
I'll admit one of mine is when you see so-and-so is trending and then I do the immediate panic and there was a meme about it today where I was like, oh my word, I'm that person. And then that becomes a rabbit hole of oh, okay, it worked. I went and looked up everything on that person.
It's so, so true. Thank you for bringing that one up, Natalie. And then Amanda said something too, that seeing something on Instagram from an author and a new book coming out, but it wasn't true. And I feel like that, that happens so often, and it tends, I've noticed a big uptick in it the last year, especially. That just, and I think of like Amanda's example. Who doesn't love Percy Jackson, right? People get so excited when there's a new Percy Jackson book, for example. And how quickly are we going to be able to start seeing, here's a picture of Rick Riordan, and here he is holding a book, and it's not a real, Percy Jackson. And I think the same thing. There is an actual new Dogman out this week. But what happens if next month somebody uses Dave Pilkey's picture and says, and here's the next new Dogman? So it can be silly stuff, but it also can, it can be real, can be kind of confusing and a little frustrating. So we're going to talk about a step that you can take to teach students how to kind of combat that later on in our time together. But I think those are excellent examples. My mom actually just reached out to me recently. They live in Arizona. And then she knew that I'd been out in Western North Carolina a couple times in the last 2 months. And she was like, well, I heard that FEMA has just left all of Western North Carolina. And I was like, oh, Mom, where did you hear that? Like, that was my first question. Well, where did you hear that? And so, it kind of opened up the door to having some conversations, with I love my mom. But it is just kind of one of those, how quick we are to hear and grab onto the negative. Instead of taking the time to, investigate a little bit. And I think that that's something that I wish we were doing more teaching on, is when it comes to media literacy, is that media is built on that emotional response, the excitement over something that might not be real, or the anger and outrage over something that might not be real, right? That's how it's built, and it knows that those are going to generate clicks. And so I think that's an important part of when we're talking about that media literacy side, especially with our students, is it might be real, but it might be how it's presented that is creating that emotional response, right? And Lindsay's like, what? Is that real? That's exactly what they're trying to get out of you. All right, so we're going to look over back in that introduction column again. If you didn't scroll to the bottom yet, Lindsay just added a little summary there. And that's why we actually asked you to give us a little bit of why you think this is important. So Lindsay, do you want to talk about how you did this?
Yeah, so honestly, I just took everybody's post and I copied and pasted them into my good friend ChatGTP and asked for a summary, and I got a short summary, which worked really well in putting it into the Padlet. And then I have a little bit of a more expanded summary, but a lot of you all were saying very similar things as well. So definitely didn't have to use ChatGTP to do it. I just felt like it made it a bit more thorough.
Thank you. Thank you for doing it. And I wanted to do that so that you all took a moment to kind of picture, why you're here, why you picked this topic. I know some of you love coming to these AI webinars, so maybe your reason for being here is just because you get something new every week. But I think a lot of you, I noticed the same thing, that there's definitely a trend that you notice right away, and that safety is a big part of it, and critical thinking is a big part of it. And then I also saw a couple people mention about, there's a lot of hesitation from teachers about using AI. And I think this is kind of a very natural way to bring AI integration into things that we're talking about anyways. So I wanted to start with that bell ringer activity because it's just a general media literacy. It's not bringing AI in necessarily right away, but we certainly could talk about ways that AI could, kind of fold into that, if you will. And I think it's important that, all of us really do, but ground ourselves in this, but also our students, why should we be learning about this is more important than the what and how to get started. That includes media literacy. So, being able to use one of those bell ringers and make it very, very relevant and meaningful for them is a good place to start. And then start teaching those strategies, right? It's a good way to kind of think about it. So thank you, Lindsay, for giving us a quick summary of what everyone was saying. Thank you. So we've done step 2, we've done the column 2. And if you find anything else that you like about this or anything you want to comment on, please feel free to do that in column 2. But I want to jump over now and walk you through some AI content, and we're gonna think about how to enhance some of those either media literacy skills or research skills using an AI tool. So this is a PDF, and if you see on the very top of column 3, it will actually open that PDF for you. So if you're having a hard time seeing or reading, it's small text, so I actually broke this into 2 different slides. But if you want to have it up on your screen, it's the top pinned resource on column 3. And it gives 6 different things that you should know about AI. And just the overview version of it is that number 1, generative AI tools are not objective, right? There's a lot more details in this poster, but that's an important thing to start with. Number 2 is they are not always reliably factual. I hope at this point most of us know that. I think a lot of our students don't. I think a lot of our students are just typing something in and they think that chat, because that is what a lot of them will just call chat GPT. It's just chat will give me an answer, and that answer, we're just going to trust it and go with it, right? Just like we can't do that with media, same thing, with what chat GPT gives us. And it's also not all bad. I think that there's also this fear that we're seeing, and I think of those of you that said something about your educators who are afraid to use it or not interested in using it yet, because they're hearing all the bad, instead of having a little bit more understanding of how can it help me, and what are some ways that it can help. And we're going to talk about that later this afternoon. Number 4 is that content is easier than ever to create and to fake. So that ties back into what we talked about first with media literacy. It signals a change in the nature of evidence. And that is a fancy way of saying you can't believe everything you see and read, right? That's what that's saying. And if you notice, I put a little graphic there. On your PDF, there's actually a hot link in this number 5 in the text box about lateral reading. And we're going to talk about that strategy in just a few minutes. And then number 6 is that reputable sources matter more than ever. And I know we have a crowd of librarians. I don't know what the plural is for librarians, but there's a whole crowd of us in here. And we know that this is us. This is what we've been talking about for so long, is that reputable sources, that's what we do. We're information specialists, and we love being able to help with this step. So those of you that are not librarians in here, please make sure you tap into those librarians. They want to help you find some good reputable sources for whatever it is that you are working on. So out of those 6 different topics that are 6 different things to know, I would love for you to think for just a minute, instead of using one of those slide decks that, an activity from the slide deck that we just looked at, I would like for you to take a minute to go into your favorite LLM. Okay, so I have a whole list in that 3rd column of, it could be ChatGPT, but also Gemini, Claude, Raina in Magic School. You don't have to even pick a tool, just go talk to Raina. Or if you're Microsoft district, you might use Copilot. And I would love for you to just I'm going to set a timer for about 5 minutes, okay? And what I'm hoping that you will do is work with your favorite LLM and ask it to create a 5 to 10 minute activity, just like the bell ringers we just saw with Simone. I want you to ask it to create a 5 to 10 minute activity about media literacy or a research skill. So teaching that age group a specific skill, okay? And what you can do is copy and paste one of those 6 things. So maybe you want to talk about that content is easier than ever to create and fake, okay? Let me show you how I would copy and paste this, because it's a little tricky the way that it is right now, but I tried to make it easy for you so you don't have to do all the typing. If you click on this actual, like you should on yours be able to click on it. I don't know why it's not open post. There we go. And then this is copy, and it's very easy to copy and paste if you hit open post. Okay, so I went up here, the 3 dots, open post, and you can copy and paste that right into the LLM. If you are in a district that does not allow you yet to be able to access one of these chat features or LLMs, then instead I would recommend that you take a look under the second item in that column. There's 2 different samples that I already made, and they're just Google Docs. So you can just open either the high school version or the elementary version and take a peek at how I chatted with Raina and able to kind of create that activity. So I'm going to give you about maybe 5 minutes at the most to be able to kind of pick that age group that you work with and ask your favorite tool to create a 5 to 10 minute activity that blends one of those things to know about AI and either media literacy or a research skill. Do you have any questions before you do this? Okay. If you need help, I'm here in the chat, but I'm going to play some music for you. And when the music stops, come back and join us. All right. Time is up on that activity, but like, look at what came up in just 5 minutes of playing. Thank you for taking a few minutes. I don't like talking in a webinar for 45 minutes. I know a lot of, or like 50 minutes. There's a lot of people who I know come to these and they just want to like get information dumped on them, which is fine, and I understand that. I just can't do it. So I had to sprinkle in a little bit of interactivity. So thank you for those of you who kind of played along. And if that was not your thing, that's totally fine. Hopefully you took a few minutes just to see what other people were coming up with. Like I know Lindsay's, I think, was in like 2.5 minutes. I think she was the first and had something up there. So there was plenty to look at. And I have to give Amanda a shout out because of course hers would be a relay. Like Amanda, the marathon runner, would come up with research relay. But so cool. I love it. Anyone want to talk about what they came up with, what they're excited about, or any questions that came up? Ooh, Pam wrote about doing something similar with her 7th graders called trust issues. I like that.
So I was just going to mention that one. So back before AI, I would have my 7th grade, I had a Symbaloo of a whole bunch of different web resources, and some were factual and some were not. And then they had like a checklist where they had to evaluate the information and determine like what tells them whether or not it was factual, like who was the author, what are their credentials, do other sources validate the information there. And then we would play a game where they would have to kind of make their decision and compare to what other people thought and have a discussion about that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Pam. I think the checklist thing too, it makes it a little more simple, right? I think sometimes we feel like you have to be like this deep investigator, but it can just be like running through a checklist. So I thought that was great.
Well, and it gives them things to kind of go to when they are, going to sites on their own. Like, let me look and see who wrote this, and let me see if something else, verifies that information.
Absolutely. And that's like a perfect bridge to what we're going to talk about next with some research strategies. So that's perfect. I'm noticing too, there's some consistency like in this topic of spotting the fakes, right? Like that seems to be pretty consistent. And it's fun. I appreciate that some of you have shared like what you used in order to create some of these. So, seeing the difference between ChatGPT versus Raina versus Copilot and some of those results that come back. So even though the topic might be similar, you might be able to steal like a discussion question from somebody. So I thought that was really cool. Anyone else have something to chime in? All right, I can't even get through all of these. Like I've been trying to scroll to the bottom of that column just to see what people came up with. But there's so many great things. So thank you for taking a few minutes. I really wanted you just to see, a lot of you probably have been using this already in very similar ways, but just to see the power of taking 5 minutes, if that media literacy slide deck doesn't work for you, that you can pretty quickly create something just as fast as scrolling through. What I like about the news literacy one, though, is that it is human made, it's vetted, and it's from a reputable source. And so that's kind of one of those things that we have to balance out as well when we're thinking about where we're going. I feel like when ChatGPT first came out, and then Magic School is like, who's going to use Teachers Pay Teachers anymore? But we are, right? There's still a lot to be said about the human creativity side of things. And so I think it just all comes back to balance. I love some of these. So I can't wait to take some time to scroll through and see, Stephanie's I just saw had something about an emotion wheel. Like, I want to know more about that. So I will be going through and seeing some more of your examples, but for the sake of time, we're going to jump ahead to research skills because we are quickly getting to the end of our time together. And I know we've spent some time talking about media literacy, but some of you asked these LLMs to create a research skill activity as well. So I want to kind of build that bridge over, and we're going to talk about the SIFT method really quick. And it reminds me of kind of what Pam was just talking about, or what are some skills and some behaviors that we can use to help students do this. When we're talking about research, a lot of people use the SIFT method. What does that look like when we're also doing things with AI. So we're going to jump into that fourth column now. And the same thing, I tried to copy and paste. So yes, you have the image and the graphic, but then in the text below it, you also have, I've copied and pasted it to make it a little bit easier to read. But the SIFT method is pretty quick. Stop, investigate the source, find better coverage, and trace those claims, quotes, and media to the original context, right? So, but what I love about this other graphic that I showed you in the Padlet is that it gives you those 4 steps, but then it shows you what does that mean when I'm looking at AI, right? Because it's one thing when I'm looking at a website and I can see that, like, I can go into the news literacy project and I can dig deeper to find out who's funding this project, who's creating it, when were things published, right? I can do that. I can't do that with ChatGPT, right? It is not, it's called OpenAI, but it's not really open. We don't know what its sources are. We can guess what its sources are, but it can't do some of those steps that I would learn regularly to do on something like a website, right? So instead, we can use these steps, the SIFT method, and I picked one that I felt like a lot of people are already familiar with, and then thinking through, what does this look like when it comes to generative AI? Below it, sorry, don't be mad at me, Lindsay, but it is a University of Michigan resource. She's a, I know, love you anyways. But there's some really good stuff on there too about using the SIFT method when we are evaluating results from LLMs. So I just wanted to give you a couple different resources. But one thing that I think is really neat about this is that it's practicing some of the same things that we talk about when we're teaching kids to evaluate other resources like websites. How many of you are familiar with lateral reading? Is that something that people are familiar with, hopefully? I see a hand up. Good. Cool. So for those of you who, I see a couple hands up, perfect. For those of you who are not familiar with it, I'll be short on this one. But typically what lateral is instead of scrolling, which is why you see that graphic on there, typically we scroll, right? We go to the bottom of something to read who was the author, who's the creator, blah, 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 right? But when we look at that 5th item, that it signals a change in evidence, we have to check the credibility, right? One way that we can do that is through lateral reading. So a lot like what Pam was just saying, and a lot of what some of those examples are, how can I jump to a new page if if I'm going to pick on ChatGPT just because I know a lot of people use it. If ChatGPT kicks back something that says Michigan beat Michigan State, sorry, Lindsay, recently, how do I fact check that, right? Well, it's not going to tell me that in ChatGPT because it probably doesn't have the most recent information, but I can go on a whole lot of other websites to fact check that. It could, lateral reading it's actually something that, as you see, professional fact checkers do as well, is being able to kind of, I know they did, jump around. They didn't win much this year, friend, but they did win a couple. It just means that you open up different websites. So I'm going to pick on my mom again. And she asked that question about, has FEMA left Western North Carolina? Well, I would tell her, instead of just going to one source, how can we check 5 or 6 and open up different tabs? I created that, or I shared that same video that you see. We're not going to watch it right now, but it's a really helpful, quick video. So if you wanted to teach that skill, whether that's to your teachers or to your students, I would highly recommend using it. But while I walk through these next 4 slides, if you would go to the 4th column for the SIFT column, and you'll see that I copied and pasted this where the Harvard Business article is. So this is a specific one about academic research using LLMs. But what I love is the subtitle, which is, remember, LLMs are your partner, not your replacement. I think a lot of our students specifically who think that these resources are a shortcut for a lot of things. But if we don't take the time to talk about, where this information is coming from and how reputable is it, but it doesn't mean that it's all bad, right? That was one of our 6 things that we need to know about AI, is it's not all bad. There's a lot of really good things that we can use it for as a partner, not as a shortcut. And so one of it is helping you brainstorm. I struggle with this, especially with research kind of topics. But as this article points to specifically, sometimes just asking the question and working it out with one of these LLMs really helps you get kind of unstuck when it comes to research. So I'm showing you kind of a big picture. This is talking about academic research, but it certainly could be something that you could share with students to help them think about how can this be a partner, a research partner, and not a resource that you only use. AI can be used to gather and analyze data. So it could be a thought, it's called ChatGPT for a reason. Chat with it, right? So be thinking about how could students, or how could you model for students, right? Some of this doesn't need to be in students' hands. I know a lot of you work with elementary and middle, and some of you just don't have access yet for students to use this. That's perfectly fine. You can still have them generate questions, right? And just like I shared with you on a Google Doc, you could show them how this chat interaction went and how you asked maybe a ChatGPT to, what kind of data do I need to be able to do this? Or here's some results that I have. Can you analyze it and find some trends, right? These would be some good things that you could be modeling and showing them as well. And I think this one's really important too, that it helps solve difficult problems that have ambiguous solutions. That is tricky for kids. I think of those of you that might work with science teachers and kids that really struggle with things that don't have a firm result of a hypothesis, for example. Like this could be one of those, what new data should I have asked for? Or what, how could I have looked at this differently? Would be a great thing that you could have, ChatGPT help with, or any LLM. It can help you verify your findings and enhance transparency. I love that so many of you copied and pasted your chat link to share that in that column when we were building the little activities, because it's that easy. It can show you the process, the thinking process that a student went through, or a thinking process that a colleague went through. And I'm going to give Lindsay a big shout out right now. I did not know how to use an LLM to create a code for my spreadsheet formulas that saved me so much time. Lindsay could have clicked through everything with me, but instead she sent me her chat. And there it was for me. I could see step by step what she asked it and what I needed to change to make it work for me, right? And then I saw how she said that didn't work. What should I try instead? And so I think this is an important part about that transparency thing, but it's also a great teaching tool, right? And then lastly, it can help you predict and parse out reviewer feedback. What does that mean? It just means it could be, a writing partner. It can be something that goes, what have I not thought through yet that somebody might question before I submit this? So there's some really kind of helpful things to think about when it comes to the research side. But I would like for you, in the little bit of time we have left, I would like for you to think about those 4 things, right? Those 4 steps, if that's something that's interesting to you. But I would also love to give you a couple scenarios for you to think about what you would do. Okay. So in that 5th column, we're jumping ahead now. In that 5th column, I want you to think about what you would do in one of these 2 scenarios, or there's a bonus one if you don't want to do one of the first 2. But I asked 2 real librarians if I could share their scenarios of how they are taking reputable resources for research and they're adding an element of AI. Okay, so one of them, the 2 scenarios are underneath that picture of a very impressive author, maybe, I don't know. He's sitting there at his table writing with one hand and painting with the other. Like, I don't know. That's pretty impressive to me. But I would love for you to just read through those 2 scenarios and maybe think about how you might adopt it, how you might adapt it. Okay, so one of them is using Britannica to do research about countries and cultures and then create, using an AI image generator, an alebrije that would complement that culture and that country's climate. Okay, so that one comes from my friend Gabriel, who's in Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools, and this is one that he did recently. So this is based off a real project that his students did. So you could think about maybe, what topic would you explore differently? What resources would you point students towards? But again, that blend of real research and how to AI enhance it. Or you could choose scenario 2. Chelsea, I will share them, Chelsea, in the Chesley in the chat, so that if you want to use them, you're more than welcome to. Scenario 2 is from my friend Jess Esposito, who's in Catawba County, And she is blending, same thing, using Britannica, but to learn about real people and to do some biography research. And then she's using School AI for students to practice chatting with that person from history. So if you want to take just a few minutes to dig in a little bit deeper, I'm going to set this timer. I know we're close to the end, so I'm going to set it for 4 minutes instead of 5. I know that's only shedding 1 minute, but that gives you just a few minutes to read the scenario and think about what you would adopt or adapt. All right. All right, so I know that time flies. I saw that Jennifer posted in the Padlet about the example number 1 about the alebrijes. and mentioned about being able to bring the assignment full circle, asking students to explain how their images relate to the research that they collected. I was super brief with this scenario, and that is actually what they do. So I'm glad that you pointed that out, that it's not just like oh, fun, let's add on a little image creation. They had to be specific about why that animal would have the adaptations that it does because of the habitat. And so, for example, an otter doesn't probably make sense in Spanish-speaking countries because most of them are somewhat warm water. So, I know that otters are built for colder water. So mine would not really make a whole lot of sense. But I think that that's a great point that you made, getting students to explain how and why, and that they have to do good descriptive writing, right? To be able to create an image like that, it does require good descriptive writing. Anybody else have something that they want to contribute or throw out there in terms of these scenarios? I will tell you, Jess is working on this plan. Actually, she has not done it yet. And as a result of working on this specific, like I said, I wanted my antenna up to be learning and thinking about how AI can be a part of the research process. Turned into me and Stacy talking about this, that she had just talked with Jess. And I thought that was really great. One thing that Jess was thinking about doing was actually creating a space in School AI for every single person that her kids chose. That's very laborious. That's a lot of work. And so Stacy was like, well, you should not have to do that. You can just have the chat ask them. And because the School AI platform has so much information behind it, then it just needs to be like the example that I linked in there, that students, it would just ask the students, well, who did you do research on? And then they start generating that conversation. And it can be pretty much anybody. I asked it about a very obscure historical person I didn't even know recently. And I was able to, it was able to give me some good content. So just know that that's one of those back to the balance of, they should know quite a bit about their person before they start engaging with School AI. And that way they know how to fact check and how to laterally read, that they might have a physical book from their library, and then they have something that they learned about in Britannica before they even jump into School AI. So you're kind of teaching that lateral reading, but bringing that conversation piece in with School AI. So that was really exciting. So if you get any other ideas about how you can bridge these, obviously you can tell I'm a very, very eager listener and learner, and I would love to hear about how you blend some of these ideas and how AI might show up in your media literacy lessons or your research skill lessons. If you want, on that very far column, I know it took me a minute to load there. In the very far column, you'll see that there's some resources, including pretty much everything I've talked about today, and then some. There's a great prompt library that AI for Education has. I've found quite a few good things in there recently, and then wanted to point you towards that we have that great resource where we had friends in our AI cohort that created, and a lot of you are in here, that created content as well. So wanted to point that out. Webinar, another article. So some good stuff that kind of helped me. Like I said, had my antenna up and was learning about these things. So I wanted to pass those along. If you have anything to add, please add it to that column. If there is something that I missed and didn't talk about, and you would love to talk about a little bit more, please email me, and be happy to kind of keep digging into this topic. It's something I'm interested in and excited to see that there's librarians and teachers out there who are building some lessons with that integration. But I know that we're really just getting started. So I think, as we saw with the AI cohort, we're better when we do this kind of stuff together and we share. So if there's anything else that comes up in your world that you want to talk about and share, or ask me to dig into myself and pass along, I would be happy to do that. Thank you for joining us. I know we have about 2 more minutes left, so my email's up there. Reach out to me if there's something I can do to support you. And if not, I will be here to answer some questions if you have them before you sign off. But thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Lindsay, for moderating and doing all the great stuff that you do behind the scenes.
It was